Thank you, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. This is my first time in Norway. It is absolutely beautiful, and everyone's been so welcoming. We're going to talk a little bit about sports products and innovation today. And a couple things about that, just to begin, I want to take a step back as well, because as a self-confessed tech geek and nerd, I tend to focus on the technology. But when we're designing, and particularly from the publisher's perspective, we want to talk about the storytelling and how that actually plays out on devices. So today we're going to talk, as I said, about creating a competitive edge, and specifically with sports, because the sports experiences tend to drive a lot of the innovation, at least in the American market. And part of that is when we have these big events, World Cup, the Olympics, things like that, we get more budget for them. And so we get to do more innovative things. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. And to be clear, a lot of this work, NBCUniversal is, of course, a big company. We have incredibly creative talent there. And we get the opportunity to collaborate with so many folks, including people like yourselves, all the vendors and the teams that support us. And so I want to talk a little bit how we work interactively together as well. But to begin with, I want to take that step back and say, so what do you do? How many of you have been to the United States and been to a cocktail party or a dinner event, and some American has walked up to you with no introduction and said, so what do you do? Right? It's our way of relating to you. We're not very good at talking about our history or our heritage, and part of that is we have a very complicated history, but also we're just trying to connect. The American market is very focused on our work, and so we identify a lot with our work. And one of the interesting things is that we even do that to our kids. You know, when they're really little, we say, so what do you want to be when you grow up? As if they should know when they're that little. So usually it's some cute response like Disney princess or, you know, a comic book superhero. In my case, I was asked that when I was 4. And I actually remember my response. And I'm pleased to say this was probably the only place in the world that my response is relevant. My answer was Viking. Now, part of that is because I grew up in Minnesota, big Scandinavian contingent. And I have a Norwegian great-grandmother who immigrated to the United States at the age of 6. But the real truth of the matter is I didn't want to just be a regular Viking. I actually wanted to be this Viking. At the age of 4, I wanted to be an NFL quarterback. Now, that is actually me, by the way, at the age of 4, thanks to my mom for tracking this gem down. The reason I'm talking about all of this is because I grew up not just in the American environment and the American media environment, but I grew up in a sports culture as well. My mom actually learned how to chart basketball and baseball games when she was little, watching sports with her father. And she still plays fantasy sports today at the age of 86. My father was an Olympic hopeful. He actually held an unofficial world record in the decathlon. And I had 2 older brothers, one who is a fantastic golfer, won all of his events, and the other one, well, you guessed it, he played American football for the University of Minnesota. He was the one I looked up to the most, and naturally I was going to one-up him at the age of 4. I say all of this because I want to emphasize from the design perspective and the language that we use in translating these sports stories into sports experiences, that this all comes at a starting point that's very innate and human to us all. See, at the age of 4, I just wanted to be on the field. I wanted to be part of the action. I wanted to play the game, right? The truth is, I really just wanted to belong. In his seminal work, Belonging in the Ancient Code of Togetherness, Owen Eastman writes, the crucial adaptation we made as a species was to form strongly bonded groups. We understood from the start that survival as an individual would be hopeless. We formed communities and tribes, their essential purpose the same, to protect and compete. Within our tribes, we built teams to enable all of this, and the ability to form strong, organized groups became the true super strength of Homo sapiens. and that's our competitive advantage. So when I talk about design, and specifically designing sports experiences, I'm really talking about creating a sentiment of belonging and relation between the audience and whatever device they're using. Now the question is, that's really abstract. How do you design for belonging? How do you actually take something like the spirit and energy that comes with these major sports events and stuff them into little devices, and worse, into 16:9 containers? Well, I think we can take a clue from some of the sports storytelling. And so today I've brought with me just a preview. We don't have a lot to share yet, but a preview of the Paris Olympics. And I'd like you to watch this video, and as you do, I think you'll see a common theme in this particular video. This is actually one of the sizzle reels for our ad sales group, and so there's a voiceover with it, but I think you'll get the general idea.
In 2024, the Olympics begin a new chapter in a city stuffed with good feels. And NBC is bringing a new approach to this evolving story. First of all, we've got live coverage from sun up to sundown.
He did it!
Then, building on the social buzz of what happened, at night we serve up 3 full hours of edge-of-your-seat entertainment.
Here's the British crowd. He's riding it to the finish.
No waiting for action. High-stakes competition only. With all the details that live coverage just doesn't have the time for.
Here's another fun way of breaking down the medal count, though, for Team USA.
We'll pay off victories with friends and family. Move the story forward through the lens of technology.
Up near 190 beats per minute.
And find room for more than a few laughs.
Oh, man, this horse is off the chain.
Setting the table for it all will be our host, Mike Tirico, welcoming athletes, special correspondents, and surprise guests to an open-air cafe studio with a one-of-a-kind view. Paris 2024 will be the best of what you've always loved about the Olympics.
He destroys his own. He's done it! The U.S. has done it!
This has been her destiny all along.
The same standard with a new vision. Let the games begin.
Do you feel it a little bit? Your heart rate up a little bit? Blood pumping a little more? That's because anytime we talk about the people in the events, we connect to that. Truly, the Olympics, sports generally, is that story of belonging, and it brings people together. And so no matter the size of the event that you're designing for a human scale. And I think that's really critical. Now, as we start to look at, and I'll go through some examples of how to do that, we want to take into consideration 3 key perspectives. There's a great sort of expression in UX design that says people ignore design that ignores people. And as a technologist, I'm always thinking about the load testing and the engineering, and did we throttle, and how many extra streams, and did we deliver that file correctly? But if we also bring it back to the people and the human experience, I think it just makes things simpler, and we end up getting a much more engaging experience. So we want to bring 3 perspectives to the design table when we're creating these experiences. The first is the athlete. And if you think about what the athlete brings to the table, they're bringing a lot of energy. Certainly they're bringing their physical prowess, and they're bringing their talent and their skill, but they're also bringing their emotional energy. And that's really critical as we start to think about this. Of course, we want to also be the artists, right? And that's all of us in this room, whether you're in QA engineering, whether you're in customer support, whether you're doing the product design, you're part of framing that experience for consumers. And it's really critical that you bring yourself to the table in these experiences. We have a joke in my team that we always do friends and family testing when we first iterate, and we always do the mom test, right? Our mom is user number 1, and she's the one that will always be able to tell you whether or not she likes the experience, and we listen because of that relationship. And last but not least, and the most important, of course, is the audience. And so we need to understand what the audience is really looking for. Of course, we need to assume that they're coming for great storytelling, for great content, but also what are they coming to the actual navigation and functionality for? So let's talk about this a little bit in detail. Athletes bring this emotional energy, right? They bring their physical aesthetics. They bring their personal culture to the table. So we can use things like close-up imagery. We can use relevant bio points. We can use cultural theming. But at the end of the day, it's the competition, that innate part of our human condition that viewers live vicariously through the physical presence and prowess of these athletes. So let's take a look at a couple examples. This first example, NBCUniversal has two divisions, also in Spanish language, Telemundo Universo, and we have the Spanish language rights to the World Cup in the United States. So in this particular case, we're curating content, short form and follow-ups of clips and interviews and things like that. And we're doing it around a specific athlete, in this case, Leo Messi. And what you see here, just in terms of graphics design, typically you would do something simple like a headshot, or you might just put the name up there, right? Or a team logo. But in this case, we're using a pose with Leo Messi, which is a little bit ambiguous. You don't know if he's frustrated or confused, or if he's excited, or doesn't look very excited, actually. I can tell you from personal experience as an athlete, not every day on the field is so great. There are times you really struggle. And it's that emotional component that human beings relate to. We also include some athlete bio points. In this particular case, Leo Messi is 5 feet 7 inches tall. I'm sure most of the soccer and football fans know that, but if you don't, just for human scale reference, that's, let me do the math right, 170 centimeters. I'm 175 centimeters. So if you see Leo Messi on the field, he's bigger than life. If you see him in the coffee shop, he's shorter than me. Here's another treatment. And again, these are graphic design treatments, a little less technical, but no less intensive for the user. Neymar, obviously, from Brazil. So trying to bring in that passion and that culture. You see a different pose there, wide open arms, more confidence, right? Bringing in the Brazilian culture to get the theming with that. And again, getting a Brazilian and Latin American fan base engaged. Now you might say, well, gosh, I don't always have the resources to do beautiful graphic design. I maybe don't have athlete headshots. Sometimes they're expensive. Sometimes I get them too late. That's fine. You can use unrecognizable athletes. Just use a cool pose. Use something that's interesting, that actually activates the space. This is simple photography. I have no idea who that is. Obviously an Olympian. But at the end of the day, the idea is that there's movement there, and human beings connect and relate to that movement. Same with a pictogram, right? Instead of just saying track and field, show some energy there and just put a little symbol that shows the movement. The next team of people, and that's mostly us, that we want to bring to the design table are the artists, right? So regardless of where you are in your company, you might be the CTO. In fact, you're still an artist in this experience. Artists help to really educate and inform the consumer, right? It's how artists see things that matters in a sports experience. So we get to contextualize the field of play. We actually get to create a sense of place for the user. And so to do that, we can do simple things like using matchup graphics that help to articulate where you are in an event. We can use data and lots of data framing to showcase strategy. These are the more technical features that we'll go into. And then we can use maps and things like that to show assumed proximity. So let's take a look, first of all, at how not to do it. And I think this is really critical because we're at a sort of a jumping off point with artificial intelligence. And I'm super excited about AI and the ability to produce and create really relevant experiences in different sizes. But at the end of the day, it still needs the human touch to it. So this is an experience for the World Cup. And just to give you a sense of reference of where you're at in the UI, you are already in a sports page. So you've made that decision. You're in the World Cup section of that sports page. And you're in the live section, watch now, right? And what you're looking at here are all the matches that are available for you to watch right now. And I'm going to start with just the background graphic, which shows an empty soccer field. football field. Again, no energy, long shadows. Everyone's left the stadium, right? It's just subliminal. In addition to that, you've got flags that have different sizes. Well, flags have different sizes, but the problem is in a user interface, it shows deference to one team over another, which may not be relevant. In addition to that, that little soccer ball, which looks to be interactive because it's placed on a background, is not. There's no interaction there. You can't actually do anything. And probably the worst of all matters is the metadata. You can see the character count in this is limited. And so I've already made 5 clicks just to get to here. And unless I know Ecuador's flag from my high school geography, I don't know who's playing. And this is particularly relevant in the American market, where we don't see these events come around that often. We may not be as familiar as we'd like with the events and the teams playing. This is our treatment of it. Okay, same exact information. The difference here is we're using the branding of FIFA in this case, and this is the just background image. Not a big deal, but at least you know where you are. We don't need to tell you to go to the World Cup page. You're already there. You recognize that. We show the matchup graphics as well, and we just label them. That's super non-technical, but makes it so much easier for the audience to just step in comfort right into the experience. You'll notice that in most of the designs, my team is really kind to always put Norway as one of the composites, and miraculously it always gets approved. I don't know how I do that. Here's another treatment. Maybe you aren't using flags, maybe you're using badging. There's an innate cool factor in sports when you think about the patches and the logos that the athletes wear, right? You think about all of the different paraphernalia that the fans buy. All of these things make a difference to a consumer. It's just visually more interesting. And many of these things can be automated as well. Let's talk a little bit about data framing. So as artists, it's a very unique thing to be able to have this data. And there are lots of different data sources that can be used, but it's also how you display it. For the American market, when we first brought the Premier League over to the United States, we didn't have a huge audience understanding, right? There are a lot of kids that play soccer now today in the United States, but a lot of adults don't really understand the game. We're in, as I said, a NFL football country. And so we had to sort of explain what was going on. The consumer didn't necessarily know, unless they'd already been a Premier League fan, what stoppage time meant. They didn't know the difference between a yellow and a red card, or why a corner kick mattered, right? And so what this does is, it's not necessarily just for the super fan, it's also for the new fan that's coming in to learn about why they want to participate in engaging in video content related to sports events. This is another example. We're getting a little more sophisticated now. These are starting to show data visualizations. Again, 13 to 15 tackles, 3-1 corners. You're showing a more aggressive team in the red, which is Man U. And as you're watching, you're starting to understand on the playing field why they're up 2-0, right? An American consumer might not necessarily get that. But as they start to see these statistics play out, and again, they can control this and go through all the details, they get a chance to see, again, all the athlete information there, all the snapshots, and then all of the offsides, fouls, yellow cards, red cards, and so forth. This is one of my favorites, actually, because the Tour de France inspires a very niche audience. Cycling fans around the world, that cafe culture, everybody that just cycles at home. There's probably some of you here that do that as well, and you watch the Tour de France. We created a lot of visualizations and graphic designs around maps and just elevations and things like that to show the different stages, and again, to educate the audience into how the Tour de France actually works. The yellow bar that you see at the very bottom there, really interesting little fact from that. So that's just showing the elevation, right, in a stage. And what we saw was, after the event was over, 30 days, we saw enormous VOD consumption continuing. And we're like, that doesn't make any sense in sports. Nobody goes back and watches old sports. What is going on? And it turns out that people were actually putting their iPads up on their bikes rewatching that stage, cranking up the bike based on the elevation of that little tracker and cycling along at home with the Tour de France. So when you start to think about, we always think, oh, we know our audiences so well, we write the stories, we create all this. We had no idea people would go back and watch old cycling content 30 days later, right? But because we gave them an interactive experience, it allowed them to engage well beyond the lifespan of the actual event. We also included maps. I love doing these when it's super fun to see it when you get the user to sort of engage, and there's this assumed proximity, right? I can now relate. I can show the entire course. I can show my location. Hey, maybe I've been there, right? If it started in a specific city, maybe I've traveled there. But again, you're giving the consumer a chance to explore and sort of co-create and co-produce their experience. Last but not least, and most important of all, the audience. This is the third perspective you want to bring to that design table. Sports, as we all know, are dynamic viewing experiences, and without knowing how the play evolves or develops, we're all just sitting there waiting for that crucial moment. So audiences want some agency. They want some control over their experience. They want to be able to do specific things, and that includes things like finding their favorites very quickly. They also want to know when the big things are happening. They don't want to miss a moment, right? They also want to co-produce their viewing experience, as I said, and have some level of customization in the process of that. So let's take a look at a couple examples. We use alerts and notifications a lot for the Olympics. Just to give you an example here, we give consumers the opportunity to follow the content that they love, right? We aren't prescriptive. We're not going to say you're going to see everything that we think you should see. We're going to let you customize that. You might be a fan of diving and cycling and boxing. You might hate basketball, but maybe someone in your family follows it and you need to pay attention, right? So you get to kind of create that experience. And then we also build it right in so that once the consumer follows the content can then follow the consumer, so they don't have to work so hard to find it. We do that by, again, using that peak emotional moment. We build the opportunity to notify you right into the video player itself. So not that many people watch the men's javelin throw, but if something really exciting happened and there was a peak moment, you have the opportunity to opt in and follow that story. And so you'll get an alert on your phone. Now, just anecdotally as an example of this, the Olympics are 18 days roughly of coverage in the US, give or take. Some of the events start before opening ceremony. And during those 18 days, we send out about 707 million alert notifications. One single notification can make all the difference between dropping into a live stream. So during the Rio Olympics, for example, Simone Biles was about to go on the beam for the gold. We sent out one notification about 10 minutes in advance saying that she's getting ready to go on. And within that 1 second, and we track them within about 1 second, 500,000 users opened the app and dropped directly into the live stream. Now, in order to pull that off, thank God, we have really great engineers and technical teams who know how to throttle all of that, who are doing all of the load testing in advance and making sure that it works. But at the end of the day, it's that human connection, that ability to relate. She's going now, and being able to open up that device and drop right in to that live stream that makes the difference in the engagement. When we bring all of these things together, when we bring the athlete and the artist and the audience together, it becomes very complicated, but it also becomes really the innovative design experience. Now, this is pushing the envelope a little bit because we're doing this both on air and we're doing this as well on devices. And so there are a lot of different technical specifications, as you well know, for all of this. But I want to take an example here. This is actually from the Olympics. And so what you're going to see in this particular experience is everything coming together. You're going to see a focus and a spotlight on the athlete. We're going to try to make it very relevant from the storytelling perspective so that you can relate to it on a human level. We're going to showcase a lot of the artistry around it by giving you an opportunity to see different stats. We'll include a map that actually parallels the run during the event. A little tricky to time because you don't know how fast they're going to ski, but it works out. And then also showing how you give the user full control over that. Again, we don't want to force this on anyone. We want them to go in and out at will and just to use it to help them create their own experience and get more engaged. Let's take a look. That's a lot. And for a new user who's coming in, that can be overwhelming. And that's, again, why sometimes it's just going back to the principles of storytelling and letting the viewer just watch the video and enjoy it. They'll come back to it and they'll start to engage after that. Just to sum up, I think using the power of belonging, when we start to look at what that means and making it relational, designing at a human scale, no matter the size of the event, doesn't matter how big it is, it can be your local sporting event, but making it relational to the people. And then bringing those three perspectives to the table, the athlete, the artist, and the audience. I think that gives you enough to really create an engaging and powerful experience and ultimately gives you a competitive edge with your sports experiences. Thank you.